This week is the final part of our Creators Edition episodes on the Image Comics book Limbo, with guests Dan Watters and Caspar Wijngaard, the co-creators of the book. For this episode, we're taking a look at the first page of the book and talking about its creation and the collaboration between writer and artist. You're watching Strip Panel Naked, I'm Hass, and I'm going to show you, along with Dan and Caspar, some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. Well, first issues must be hard, right? But then first pages, I imagine, must just be very, very, very tough. Do you feel like a pressure to kind of try and establish something quickly, or like how do you approach that very first page?
Well, we actually Marvel methoded these first 5 pages. I'd written a script of pitch pages initially, but it was nowhere near as tight, and there was sort of issues that we hadn't sort of settled on the 80s thing quite as hard. So there was sort of things like Clay had a mobile phone, and there was all these different sort of things going on. So I'd written that, and then we sort of talked about it, and it didn't quite work. But then I went away to do Lake's Comic-Con, and Caspar wasn't there. He was at home. He just wanted to start getting cracking. So he sort of told me he was just going to draw it. So the first 5 pages were done sort of Marvel method, and then the rest of the pitch was full script. Although having said that, the dialogue, which on the first page, which it makes me cringe a little bit, it was definitely like a thing of trying to set tone. Mm-hmm. It was pretty important to sort of fling it in with a pretty hard-boiled noir monologue, and would sort of introduce this idea that Clay sort of thinks he's living in a detective novel, but he's not quite. And the other way to sort of say that straight up front is the lizard on the stick as well, which was just our way of immediately sort of telling you this isn't a normal sort of bar in a normal sort of place. Because
the other thing that does really nice is balance that line between familiar and not familiar. How much went into trying to figure out that balance?
That was such a big thing for me, at least, because our big thing with this was also to try and make a really weird comic. Yeah, that was intentional. Well, not weird, but as in just to not hold ourselves to sort of hard rules. Because there's such a sort of trend towards sort of realism in comic. When we were doing Limbo, that was definitely sort of there, and you sort of don't get that sort of tendency towards the weird.
I think with the lizard on the stick, like him explaining that that's his favorite thing, that's the best thing you could have in this bar is, from the first panel, it's odd, it's off. We didn't want to mislead anyone into this book something that it wasn't. Yeah. And I was worried they were going to get that with issue 2, from the 3 panels in, he gets sucked into a TV. I thought people were going to be like, this book, and just toss it on the floor, throw it out the window and have a car run over it. And then they're just looking from the window smugly yeah, you deserve that for making me think. How dare you make me read this book where a guy gets sucked into the TV?
You must be conscious of the fact that the very first thing they will see is a pink lizard on a stick with a kind of a mustardy yellow background and green fingers and green bandaged fingers.
We had a rough outline of what was going to happen in that scene, but I think I really wanted to open on a weird looking lizard on a stick. Mm-hmm. A close, that kind of opening to a movie almost, in a way that was just kind of when a movie starts and it's just something really odd, the first shot is just something really weird, and you're just I don't know what this movie is, but I love it already. It was you only have to look at the first panel to know if this is the kind of book that you're going to continue to read. Again, like we said before, I didn't want there to be any false pretense to what this book was going to be, and I didn't want to pull the wool from over your eyes later on in the book and be whoa, we joked he's living in the TV world or something like that. Also, me and Dan have done books before where logic was built into the world, everything had to work to Christopher Nolan logic. Yeah. There was no fun in that, really. It became.
It just doesn't exploit the medium. We're talking about the Batman films, and the reason it's done in that way is because if you did true to the comics, it's more Adam West than it is Christian Bale. Mm-hmm. So you need to translate things into different medium, but things seem to often get translated back into comics that way. Yeah. That was what we didn't want to do.
Talking about the first page of a comic, the other thing that's really, really, really noticeable. We talked about it a little bit already, but the colour. At what point did you decide that you were going to have purples, you got pinks? But he kind of tends, especially in that second panel, right, is that he's clearly kind of sits alone. Is that stuff that you're designing on purpose to make him feel kind of out of place in the world, or is that just kind of the nature of neon heavy colour choices you're making?
A bit of both, really. It's I think a lot of it's always a bit of luck, a bit of both, a bit of playing around with it. It was never my first choice. Mm-hmm. I think those first 5 pages, the colours don't really work very well together. It was the pitch, and I was trying to find my feet. As the book progresses, I start to use a lot more pastels and a lot more neon colours. I think in the first couple of pages there's a lot lot of reds and yellows, which I just avoided later on in the book. I just didn't want to use red or yellow, or just like I wanted to use off, like pastels of those colours, or pinks and purples. I think originally he was just blue and the background was purple, but then that just didn't feel like it was enough. So I changed the colours of the fishmen to slightly off pink, and then it just kind of built from there. As far as I can remember, I went back and redrew all the neon on these pages as well, and the backgrounds a little bit, because they were pitch pages. I think I did them in about 3 or 4 days. I think I did the 5 pages in about 3 or 4 days, because we were literally just getting it together to pitch to Image like at Thought Bubble. We were just like, Thought Bubble was coming out in a week,
The way that you guys are talking about your working relationship and the way that you're doing this comic, it's not just look at the page and go, that's what that person did, that's what that person did, that's what that person did. It's like, even you're saying sometimes you guys don't even remember who did what. Like, do you think that type of relationship can lead to better results?
I think that relationship is more common in comics, especially creator-owned comics, than people even know about. That I think that's why talking about it in general is really important, because it's a collaboration. It really is. Like, Dan didn't just be like, oh, we got an Image book, or here's the script, and then just like, well, what I like, it's my book. I worked on this book for like 18 months, no more, all the time, back end.
Yeah.
So like, the book was to come out, and it did in some places, Amazon and Goodreads like that, where I'm not even credited. Like, you spend like your day in life sweating, bleeding over this book. And to not get credited is heartbreaking. Really important that like people sit down and listen to us, especially journalists that just think that the writer is the sole driving force behind the book, and the artist just comes in and just flicks their wrist and it's just easy peasy and it's done, and they don't care or just walk away from it, because that kind of seems to be the perception at the moment. And with creator-owned books especially, that's not the case.
And that is an important point, and one we've heard through all the other Creators Editions episodes too. The relationship is often much more fluid than just one person who writes and another who draws those words. And that's actually a big part of what makes the medium an interesting, unique, and ultimately exciting place to tell your story. Thanks for watching. If you're a fan of Strip Panel Naked, we'd love you to support us on Patreon, where you get access to tons of extra goodies like annotated comics, pages, articles, and longer Creators Editions conversations. For more Comics Talk, you can find me on Twitter at HassanOE. And finally, hit subscribe to keep up to date with all the Strip Panel Naked episodes, and we'll see you next time.